All right, so the Renaissance, Unit 1.2, we're going to be discussing the rebirth, which is what Renaissance means, in Italy. So a little bit of background of the Renaissance. It's going to be considered the beginning of of modern European history. So it's going to be about 1450 to present that this class will cover, but it starts before that, about circa 1300 to 1600. Approximately, and it's going to be a turning point or watershed point in history. And in your chart that I gave you as a study guide in the outline, you can see that it's going to compare all of these differences from what life was like in the Middle Ages to what life is like in the Renaissance. So not everything's going to change, but a lot of things are going to change. And so the Renaissance is going to occur first in Italy, circa 1300, and last until the mid-16th century, about 1527. And then it is going to spread northward into northern Europe around 1450, into places such as France and the Netherlands. If you kind of think of the Renaissance as a flower, like the stem would start in Italy and then it would bloom out into Northern Europe. And then eventually it will reach England in the 16th and into the 17th centuries, about the Shakespearean time. So that's about the 1500s to 1600s is when the Renaissance is going to hit England. Of course, people at this time weren't walking around going, "Oh, I'm living in the Renaissance. Life is great." The term Renaissance actually isn't going to be coined until the 19th century. So in the 19th century, a Swiss historian by the name of Jacob Burckhardt is going to claim that the Renaissance period stood in distinct contrast to the Middle Ages. He's going to say it's obvious that some things were changing compared to the Middle Ages, and he's going to label this time a Renaissance because it's a rebirth. If you remember, the Dark Ages is going to get its term then at this time because it seemed dark in contrast to the great Roman times before and this time period of the Renaissance after, and so he's going to coin this term Renaissance. It's going to be important to note that it's going to be a change in thought and a move away from theology more towards reason, but not completely yet. We'll see this continue as we move towards the Enlightenment. But it is going to be a change to a lot of things, not everything, so keep that chart in mind as you prepare for this unit exam. Another thing to keep in mind is that Renaissance culture, these changes will apply almost exclusively to the upper classes. It's important to know that it didn't apply to everyone. The upper classes are going to be the only one with the luxury of the extra time or the time at all to spend learning the classics, learning the works of the Greeks and the Romans, because the peasantry are working all the time and are largely illiterate. So the Renaissance ideas are going to have little impact on the common people. And also because they were far too preoccupied with the concerns of daily life. Like, if you're concerned with just surviving, I'm pretty sure that checking out some art isn't going to be your number one priority. So it's important to know these two things. The term coined in the 19th century, it starts in Italy, and that it pertains mostly to the upper classes. So when we study society, it's not applying to everyone. Yeah, so since it starts in Italy, we need to talk about what Italy looked like at this time. It is not the unified nation state that you think of when you think of Italy right now. Of course, there were Italians in Italy, but they're not unified. The Renaissance is going to start in Italian city-states. And so Italy at this time was comprised of independent sovereign city-states that had developed into international trade centers or financial centers, mostly here in the north. So if you see these northern Italian city-states up here, this is primarily where we're going to have our concern here at the beginning, is in the north. Places such as Genoa, Venice, Milan, here at the top of the map. And they're able to do this because they develop international trade, which allows them to make tons and tons of money, which allows them to become financial centers that allow them then to pay for the culture. So it all starts with trade. The city-states are going to be ruled by what are known as signori, or despots, so individuals in great power, or sometimes by oligarchies, which means rule by merchant aristocracies or rule by the few elite. And these individuals or small groups will control much of Italy by 1300. They're able to develop this economy, which will lead to the Renaissance, just because of their geography. If you look here and on the map, I'm getting ready to switch slides. Here we go, and on the map here, you can see the geographic location on the Mediterranean. The Italians have been able to come in contact, and you've learned about the Crusades in previous classes, but come in contact with the Middle East and come in contact with goods that people throughout Europe want. And so they are going to become middlemen. They are going to buy the goods cheaply, and then they're going to bring them into Italy and then export them out and sell them for quite a profit. And it is this extra money that they will then use to produce the culture that you are more familiar with when you think of the Renaissance. Also, a result of these financial actions or trade of becoming financial centers is that Italy is going to become more urban. It is actually going to have more towns and cities with significant populations than anywhere else in Europe at this time. The rest of Europe is like forest, 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 village, forest, 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 village, while Italy is building itself into urban centers. And so the makeup and dynamic of these Italian city-states is going to lead to politics that breed competition and warring amongst each other. This competition among the city-states to be like the greatest financial center is going to mean that Italy will not unify politically, will not become the nation-state you think of until much later. So you can kind of see here Florence, which we're going to come back to, is at the height of population and urban center. Rome, Venice, Genoa, and here's just some pictures corresponding with each. But it's really important to note that in effect, an early balance of power diplomacy pattern is going to emerge where weaker states are going to ally with other states to prevent a single state from dominating the peninsula. Machiavelli, which we're going to talk about in class and that you will have a reading on, is one of the individuals who thinks that maybe this domination should have happened, that a city-state should have risen up over the others, because as we're going to see, this competition and warring is going to be a big downfall of Italy and going to lead to some problems there. Because if you're not all on the same page, you open yourself up to being easily conquered, and that is going to bring about some issues that we're going to follow as we move forward. One issue is that Italy isn't going to unify until 1870, so much later. So when you think about the history of Europe and how many nation states, the big picture here, Northern Europe is consolidating. We got out of the 100 Years' War. England is becoming a nation of its own with a king. France is becoming a nation of its king. And Italy isn't going to be centered. And we're going to talk further about this in Unit 1.3, but it's important for you to note that Italy's downfall in the late 15th and early 16th centuries is going to be caused by this political disunity when the French and Spanish armies are going to invade Italy. So before we can get to all that, though, we need to talk about each of the independent city-states, their strengths, what kind of governments they had, the families that ruled them, and what's going to lead us into some problems in Italy. Okay, so our first major city-state is going to be the Republic of Florence. This is where the Renaissance is going to start. It includes the Republic of Genoa. So it will start here and be the center of the Renaissance during the 14th and 15th centuries. And it's really going to give birth to one of the most powerful families, and probably one that you're most familiar with, the Medicis. So the Medici family, sometimes also called Medici, was a merchant family, so really prospered off of the trade and international financial center that Florence had become. So they're going to start making their money in trade, and then they're going to say, how can we make more money? And so what if we started to lend money to people, and then when they paid it back, they had to pay back interest? And so then the Medici family will become bankers and then find themselves in very powerful situations within Florence. The first individual that we need to talk about is Cosimo de' Medici, 1389 to 1464, and he is really going to be kind of our patriarch and ally with other powerful families of Florence, and will become the unofficial ruler of the Republic. He kind of becomes, there's this Republic, so people are voted in, but he is the power behind the scenes. He's controlling the elections, he's controlling who gets to kind of have a say, and he will be by far the most powerful of the Medici rulers. His son, Lorenzo de' Medici, or Lorenzo the Magnificent, 1449 to 1492, is going to be more important to us in the Renaissance, not only because he's of the Medici family, but because he's going to take all the money and power of his family, and he's going to start spending it, and he's going to become a significant patron of the arts. And then as we move on forward in our lectures, you're going to see that his son, Pope Leo X, is going to play an important role in the Protestant Reformation as we move forward. So the Medici family will follow us here, or will follow them for quite some time. Okay, so we just came from Florence here, kind of right in the center, and now we are going to move to Milan, which is here in the light blue. The Duchy of Milan is ruled by the Sforza family after 1450. Milan is going to become a major enemy of Venice and Florence until an event that we've already talked about in 1453. If you remember, there is a fear or a threat that comes from the outside, and that's going to be the Ottoman Turks moving in to take over. And so this threat from the outside is actually going to unify these fighting families, these fighting city-states for a little while, because they're more afraid of the Turks or the Muslims coming in than they are hating each other. And so we're going to see the Peace of Lodi in 1454 is a peace treaty that's going to be signed by these families in the city-states, and will create a relative time of peace, about 40 years in northern Italy. And this is where we're going to see most of that art and culture arise, because they're done fighting with each other because of a threat from the outside. It's going to allow about 40 years of peace and a stable balance of power for a time. Now, this isn't going to last, but about 40 years. Then our third major city-state is going to be Rome, the Papal State, sandwiched right here in the middle. Of course, you know, also the center of the Roman Catholic Church. Popes are going to serve both as religious and political leaders in Rome, and it will control much of central Italy. We're going to discuss later why the Pope thought he had political power, but it's just important that you know the geographic location right now, and that we have the Pope residing over the Papal States, not an oligarchy, not a family, but the Pope serving as both a religious and political leader in the center of Italy. Okay, and then our fourth is Venice, or the Venetian Republic. It is sometimes called the City of Canals because it is under the sea level. So there are canals. You're probably pretty familiar with all the gondolas. Those are things that are associated with Venice up here in green, or the Republic of Venice, because it's the type of government that it had. You might want to visit it now, some people say, because of global warming, the sea level keeps rising, so it may be completely underwater before we know it, and they do have trouble with water coming into their plaza, and so water an increasing problem. But the City of Canals, speaking of water, it is the greatest maritime power in Italy because it is a shipping area, and one of the world's greatest naval and trading powers during the 14th and 15th century. So that's its importance at this time period. And then on to our last and fifth powerful city-state, Naples. So Naples are sometimes called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, as you can see here. So here's the Kingdom of Naples, and then there's this island off of Italy called Sicily. So the Kingdom of Two Sicilies is completely in the south. It is the only Italian city-state to officially have a king. But if you remember when we looked at the map of the division of the church, so you had the map of Italy, and you had the top part, of course, that was allied with the Roman Pope, and then the bottom part that was a different color because it was allied with the Pope in Avignon. That is because the south is going to be controlled by France between 1266 and 1435, and then controlled by Spain after 1435. So it's going to trade hands here. So the south is going to, as we follow Italy and follow how late its unification is, this separation here is going to be a problem that continues to plague Italy, as we have other nations controlling the south. So the north and south will develop very independently from, you hear people say, I'm not Italian, I'm Sicilian. I mean, that's still from this time period, so we'll get more into that as we move. But I just love their cityscape. If you can just see in this picture all of the buildings of different color right on the water. It's just breathtaking. So although we have these great, powerful, rich city-states, eventually we're going to see the Italian city-states decline. We've already talked about, of Sicily and the Kingdom of Two Sicily and Naples, we're going to have a lot of invasions. And French invasions are going to begin in 1494. And this really comes out of that disunity of Italy. So you have the French king, Charles VIII, trying to invade Naples, the traditional enemy of Milan. And so then you have these other city-states who are like, maybe I'll hurt the city-state that I don't like, and I'll become friends with the French king and help him out. And so then the French are going to have a hand up in coming in. And so this will be the beginning of foreign invasions throughout the Italian peninsula that's really going to lead to its decline, is that they can't unify together. And in fact, not only are they not unified, they're helping the quote-unquote enemy come into Italy. So it's in this time period in Florence, so the home of the Medicis, that Florence is going to attempt to appease or calm down France during its invasion in 1494. And this is ultimately going to lead to the overthrow of the Medici family, because this other guy is going to come into power. He's a Dominican priest, and his name is Girolamo Cerignola, and he is going to become the unofficial leader of Florence between 1494 in 1498. And how he does this is he is going to pledge to rid Florence of its decadence and corruption. He's a very Joan of Arc-esque character figure, because he's going to say the reason we're getting invaded and all this bad stuff is happening is because we need to clean up our act. We need to get holy. We have all this decadence and corruption. And so he's going to begin attacking the church and pope. The pope at this time is Alexander VI. He's going to accuse the Pope of buying his office, of being corrupt, and we'll come back more to about Alexander VI and the platform that Cerignola stands on by some things that Alexander VI is doing pretty openly that definitely is corrupt. But before this, because you just didn't come out and people like, oh yeah, like I'm going to go against the church for you. He had actually built up some credibility because he had predicted that the Pope would die, and also had predicted the French invasions due to paganism and moral decay in the Italian city-states. So he kind of takes on this prophetic like aura, very Joan of Arc. It's like we need to clean up our act, and then things are going to start going our way. And so the Pope that he is speaking of, if I had assigned a summer reading assignment, which I didn't this year, there is a book called World Lit by Fire, and it kind of gets a little graphic, but it helps you understand how Cerignola was kind of able to very easily promote this, like, look how corrupt and bad the church is. This is why all this bad stuff is happening. We need to, clean up our act. And so Pope Alexander VI, I guess you could call him the simplest way, the orgy pope. So right there, he's not very clean, not very respectful, what you'd think a pope should be. He's definitely not celibate. He has mistresses. He has illegitimate children. He's known for having orgy parties. And so according to William Manchester, the author of World Lit by Fire, servants kept score of each man's orgasms, for the Pope greatly admired virility and measured a man's machismo by his ejaculative capacity. After everyone was exhausted, His Holiness distributed prizes, cloaks, boots, caps, and fine silken tunics. The winners, according to Burchard, were those who made love with those courtesans the greatest number of times. So pretty hard to say that you were an upstanding man of the cloth if these were the kind of soirees that you were hosting, and nevertheless having people participate in like recording the number and recording the individuals who were there and the number of women that went in and out. So he definitely did not make it difficult for Cerignola to say, look at the corruption, look at all of the things going on within the church. And so Sarignola is going to take all of this and say, we need to follow God's rules in Florence. We need to rise above this. If we do this, all these bad things are going to stop happening to us. Get rid of all this self-centered stuff. And so he's going to create what is known as the bonfire of the vanities. So vanity, like being vain, all of these materialistic, selfish things. And we're going to burn all of these materialistic goods, mirrors, cosmetics, lewd pictures, fine dresses, immoral books. And he's like, if we do this, we're going to get God on our side. And so, he starts out, with this, they're kind of trying to have appeasement of the French, but it's going to turn into him even joining with the French king. Because, of course, you think the Pope's very happy with him. No, the Pope's really angry with him. He even says, you better stop preaching, Sarignola. And so he allies with the French king, hoping he'll get some support from France, hopes for help, because the Pope is so mad at him, he actually excommunicates him. So probably the worst thing that could happen to you if you're Catholic, because then that means an eternity in hell. And so at first people are going to be really on board with Sarignola, but then we're going to see that as things progress, he's going to kind of lose some favor here. And so the reason he really starts to lose favor is because here's this guy who's like, you're bad, you're wrong, everything you do is vain. And people are going to be like, stop it already. And so he really loses favor with the people, and then the Pope, after having him excommunicated, is then going to have him burned at the stake for heresy. So here's a picture of the square. Here's a picture, or a statue of Sarignola. But he's going to be burned at the stake, and so this is all of the political stuff going on. So, we have all these pictures and arts being created on the other side that we're going to get to, but there's all of this political issue going on in Italy at the time. But we have Sarignola out. We'll have the Medicis come back in. And so here Italy has become this battleground in a series of power struggles between Spain and France. And so we're going to enter into our individual, who you're going to be doing the reading about in class next time we see each other, and that is Niccolo Machiavelli. And so Machiavelli is witnessing all of this, Italy becoming a battleground, all of this Sarignola stuff, Florence, the Medicis, and he is going to write a book about it. And he is going to say, you know what, Italy really does need a strong, powerful ruler, not just all of these things going on. And so Machiavelli is going to look across Italy and everything that's going on that we just talked about, and he's going to say we do need a strong leader, but that leader needs to unify Italy, needs to stand up and unify it. And his book is actually going to kind of be an instructional manual on how to do this. It's the quintessential political treatise of the 16th century. And so the title of his book is The Prince. Machiavelli had actually been able to observe in this time period the political leadership of Caesar Borgia, who is actually the son of Pope Alexander VI, the orgy pope. And Caesar had ambitions of uniting Italy under his control, of becoming that strong leader and unifying Italy to help prevent or stop these invasions. And so here's Caesar Borgia, the son of Alexander, Pope Alexander VI. And so Machiavelli is going to write him this book. It's like tips for how to be a prince, how to be a strong leader. And the Borgias are actually originally from Spain, but Machiavelli is going to take this and he's going to be one of those people, like we spoke about earlier, that's going to say, we do need this unified Italy. We need a strong leader who's willing to do whatever it takes to protect Italy. And so Machiavelli's goal in The Prince is really a handbook, or trying to teach how to be a strong ruler. And so he is going to state that politically the ends justify the means, which means if your goal is unifying Italy, then whatever you have to do to accomplish that goal justifies it. Just as like if your goal is to get an A in a class, then whatever you had to do to get there would justify it, even if that included, let's just say, Lord forbid, cheating or stealing a copy of the test. He's going to say if your goal is good for the nation in which you rule, such as unifying Italy, would protect it, then it doesn't matter what you have to do to get there, because the ends justify the means. Machiavelli is also going to say that the sole test of a good government is for it to be effective, so it doesn't matter really what it's doing as long as it's effective. Also, pretty well known for saying that rulers, that it was better for them to be feared than to be loved, so you are going to get more accomplished and be more successful if you have the fear of your people rather than their love. But if you can, be both. He does say that it would be better to be both. He also says that rulers have to be practical and cunning in addition to being aggressive and ruthless. So he's saying that sometimes rulers should behave like a lion, so aggressive and powerful, but at other times like a fox, cunning and practical. And so you have to be both. And we'll talk about more of the statements of Machiavelli, more of the propositions that he gives in The Prince on how to be a strong ruler when we come back together in class next week. But no single ruler is going to ever be able to take over Italy during the Renaissance, but the Prince will continue to influence, and still does today, influence rulers. It's read about how to be a strong, powerful ruler, so very influential still to today. But as I said earlier, you can't really put a start and end on the Renaissance politically, but we do have a date that is going to really be, that moment where you see the Renaissance decline, and that is the sack of Rome in 1527 by the armies of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. So you think Holy Roman Empire is kind of like modern-day Germany. He was also the King of Spain at this time, and this is really the symbolic end of the Renaissance in Italy. So we've covered all of the politics of the start, how it started, why it started, the politics that caused it, and the politics that are going to end it. And then we're going to go through what the Renaissance was culturally. But the sack of Rome in 1527, or pretty much the destruction of Rome, is going to peter out or end the Renaissance for us because of the decline of Italy, because they could not come together and be unified, did not apply all of Machiavelli's works. And that's where we'll pick up next week, is reading from The Prince and moving into the culture of the Renaissance, or what came out of the Renaissance, beginning with humanism.